Hello and welcome to the garden. Just a quick video today. I'm going to take a look at some of my pepper plants, and I need to do just a little bit of pruning just to get the larger fruited sorts underway. But what I thought I'd do is start in the greenhouse here and show you how the others are doing. It's remarkable at this time of year just how quickly these can grow. So this is a Hungarian hot wax, and you can see that, well, these were tiny just about a week ago, and they're already racing away. Plenty of fruit set on this plant, and lots on this one behind as well. This is the bushy pepper. This is one I haven't grown before, but that's a very nice looking fruit there, and several of these higher up have set as well. And similarly on the neighbouring plant, got lots of fruit coming here. My Goria peppers are on the way. This is a very nice one. It's got quite a pleasant warmth to it, very nice flavour. And a slightly larger one on the neighbouring plant. And again, I'm getting fairly consistent fruit set. I've got fruit all over this plant already. And there's a young one there. This flower's going over it, but yeah, the fruit is there. I can pull that old flower away now. The aphids, we've got one or two on the plants, and they do congregate on the petals, so it's not a bad idea to remove them when they're looking a bit old and tired and they've served their purpose. But yeah, I got good fruit set, and it won't be too long before we get the first sort of edible sized chilies out of here. So there are lots of videos out there about pinching out and pruning peppers, and different people do it different ways, and there are lots of ways you can go about it that are entirely sensible and quite useful, but it depends what you're trying to achieve as to which one is the most appropriate for your situation. Now, the really common thing to do is to pinch out the peppers and chilies when they're about yay tall. It doesn't really matter. At that point, they're a single stem, and at some point you will pinch that out just above a leaf. And the idea is that then the plant becomes more bushy. You get the side shoots growing up. I mean, exactly the same thing as if you're pruning a tree. You cut back a limb and then you get regrowth from further down, and you're going to end up with a shorter and more bushy pepper. Now, there are two really good reasons why I don't do that in the greenhouse here. So the first is that I've got a lot of plants in here. I've got 36 chilies and sweet peppers in here, and they're pretty close together. They're in 10-litre pots, and I've got those dishes underneath. Well, they're all packed as closely as they can. So you can see here I've got these pots pretty close together. The trays are touching on the bottom, and I don't know how far apart these stems are, but there's not a huge amount of space between them. They're not getting in each other's way. They grow quite happily like this, and there's still reasonable airflow, but of course they will start to encroach as they get bigger. The thing is, I've got enough height here that I don't want to encourage more bushy growth than I'm going to get naturally anyway, because that's just going to make this really crowded down here. So because I've packed so many plants in here, and I think I'm always going to prefer to pack a lot of plants in, that's one reason why I don't want to encourage a particularly bushy set of plants. So you can see on this one, this is one of the hot wax peppers, that the side shoots are just starting to appear. So when this was a younger plant, and typically before the stem naturally divides, you'd pinch that out, say here, and that would encourage all of these side shoots to come up. So in all of the leaf axils, there's the potential for a new shoot. It depends on the variety. Some of these will develop more readily than others. With some of the plants, you don't get all of these low down, not unless you prune it back a little bit, and others like this one are producing them quite freely already. But you can see if I'd pinched this plant out at this point, I would have a multitude of side stems developing here, and each one of these then develops in exactly the same way as this main stem. So at some point, and it's here on this plant, it will naturally divide. Now it depends on the variety slightly and also on the individual plant. These split often into 2 or 3 branches. So this one is divided at this point into 3, and then at each subsequent split it seems to be going into 2. I've got 2 again here, 2 up there, and so on, and this will just keep dividing as it goes up. So the plant is going to become bushy up the top. I'm going to end up with quite a canopy up the top. So one of the reasons I like the sort of natural shape with this spreading canopy is that it leaves quite a lot of this area, even though the plants are close together, it leaves it quite open, and that's really good for airflow. Good airflow is one of the keys to healthy plants. So on to the second main reason why I don't pinch out these peppers. I grow a mixture of small and large fruited sorts, partly because there are lots of really nice small fruited sweet peppers, as well as the chilies, of course. Most of those tend to be fairly small fruited, and they have the big advantage of fruiting much earlier in the season than, say, a big bull's horn type such as I'm growing in the main greenhouses, or some bell peppers. It takes a long time for the fruit to physically develop, and then it hangs around for ages, especially if the weather's a bit moody, trying to ripen. And I'm not that fond of green bell peppers and green bull's horn peppers, so I do like to let them ripen, and it takes quite a while. The small fruited sorts, they produce an abundance of fruit, but it also comes to full size very quickly, and it will ripen much more quickly. So I'll be taking harvests from here long before the big fruited sorts are ready to go. So early fruit is one of the main reasons for having these growing in this way here. And if I pinch out the peppers to produce a more bushy plant, not only do I not favour that form here because I've got enough height, I don't want the width, I want to grow vertically, not horizontally. That will slow down the fruiting. It stands to reason. In order for this to produce its first fruit, the stem has to split. So let me show you again where the fruit are appearing. It's always interesting to look at a plant and try to understand its growth habits, because that way it will inform everything you do with it. So you can see here that in this split here where this stem has divided into 2, I've got a fruit. In fact, I've got 2 at this location. Very often you only get the 1. And again, at this split, I've got a fruit. And looking higher up, every time the stem splits, there's the possibility of a fruit. So these flowers may or may not set. So at some of these locations, I may not end up with a fruit, but there's the possibility at every one of these divisions in the stem for there to be a fruit. So, I mean, that's the growth habit. There's also the possibility of a shoot here. We've got a leaf, so in the leaf axil there's the potential for a shoot, and then we've got the potential for a fruit, and that's how they grow all the time. This is their habit, so you know where the fruit are going to appear. So whether or not you're going to get that fruit depends on conditions, whether the plant is happy, and the temperatures and the environment. peppers and chilies are, generally speaking, self-pollinating, and I mean that in the true sense. Very often the word self-pollinating is used as a substitute for self-fertile. Now, they are self-fertile, but they're also generally self-pollinating, so that even without intervention from insects or anything else, they will set fruit. They tend to want a bit of a breeze, so if you've got a little bit of airflow, and I have here, because I've got a louver vent at one end and I've got the window and the door open here, so I do get airflow in here. These stems are always moving a little bit, that always helps. Insects will do some pollinating, and particularly that sort of buzz pollination that you get with some of those pollinators. That's really great for dislodging some of the pollen and giving you good fruit set. There are all sorts of reasons why you might not get every one of these flowers producing fruit. On the larger fruited sorts, after they've set a certain amount, there tends to be quite a bit of drop after that, because the plant thinks it doesn't need to produce any more fruit, and it puts its energy into ripening those. So the more you pick, the more you're going to get. And if you like green peppers, I don't, but if you do like green peppers, then picking them when they're green is going to encourage the plant to produce a lot more fruit. But I'm getting sidetracked, as I often do. The point here is that I'm not going to get a fruit until that stem splits. Doesn't happen. You don't get fruit all the way up a single stem. You get that fruit in that position when that stem first splits. That's the first possibility of getting a fruit. You may or may not get it, but you're not going to get one before then. So if I pinch out my main stem before it's had a chance to divide, I've taken away my first possible fruit. And I've got to then wait for the side shoots to come up, and they've then got to divide before I get a chance for my first fruit. And that is going to delay fruiting of these for some weeks, let's say. It's a little bit hard to say what that might be. It will depend on the variety and how early you started them and the point you pinched them out and so on. But I'm certainly going to get fruit much more quickly by leaving them alone, and that's the second main reason for doing it. One is the shape works better for me here in this situation. The second is I want these particularly to give me those first fruits. This slightly scruffy specimen here is Lombardo. It's always a little bit scruffy. It's got its first fruit on there, just starting now, but this one is at, I think, one end of the spectrum in terms of shoot development. This one always wants to throw up tons of side shoots, and you can see they're just starting to split here now, and I can see flower buds appearing on those side shoots. But it's going to be a while before that one is at this sort of stage and ready to produce. But I think this one can be a little slow to get going because it puts more energy into vegetative growth early on than some of the others. So I know I mentioned some of this in brief when I did the planting video, but I thought I'd go into a little bit more detail here about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it this way. So that's how I treat the smaller fruited sorts. The larger fruited sorts, they are a different game altogether. So some of these will probably produce reasonable sized fruits, but when I'm talking about the larger fruited sorts, I'm thinking of either bell peppers or bull's horn peppers. Now last year my bell peppers didn't do nearly as well as the bull's horn type. It was a bit of a moody season last year, so that might explain it. But anyway, this year I've just got the bull's horn types, and the thing is, those fruit are, in comparison to the wee things I'm going to get on these, they're enormous, and the plant cannot produce the same quantity of those large fruits that this one will produce with its small fruits. It stands to reason. So that means that you don't actually need all of this branching framework. All of this scaffold is not needed for the quantity of fruit that you're going to produce. So I'm using an approach that I've seen, I think, mainly with commercial growers, where they take a fixed number of stems and that's all they grow, and they're growing vertically rather than horizontally. That's always a good idea in the garden, of course. It makes better use of space. So long as you've got the height and you can support the plants, you might as well go up rather than sideways. So it's a judgment call as to how many stems you take up. I tend to take up 2, but you could take 3, or indeed even just the 1. And every time that stem branches, one of these that you're training up, every time that stem branches, you choose only one of those branches to continue. You prune the others out. But at each of those divisions, you've got the possibility for a fruit to develop. And if you think about it, over the season, 1 stem or 2 stems, they're going to be able to carry pretty much as much fruit as that pepper plant is going to be able to provide for you. But in pruning it that way, and it might look as though we're limiting the fruit, but almost certainly we're not. But we're also producing an open and healthy plant, and the sun can get on the fruit and so on. It's not all crowded and bushy. So there's every chance that we're going to get really good quality fruit off of healthy plants, and they're going to ripen well. So, you know, I don't think there's any disadvantages. I'm not aware of any particular disadvantages with that sort of pruning and training, and that's how I like to do it. And I can't imagine getting a larger or better crop by maybe leaving them natural or then pinching out and going for a bushy plant. I don't think that works particularly well for the largest fruited sorts. You tend to get a jumble of fruit, and I mean you can get that with the small plants. But if I look at this one here, for example, the bull's horn pepper will grow in exactly the same scale as this one. And I mean, this fruit here, that one would be fine. It can hang down, there's plenty of space for it. But you imagine all of these fruits suddenly developing. Try to imagine a bull's horn pepper hanging at each one of these locations. It's so crowded that they just don't develop properly. It's even worse with the bell peppers. They can get really jammed in there tight, and it's not what we want. We want to give those fruit plenty of space to develop properly. So we're going to take a look at those larger fruited sorts, and I'll show you what I'm doing today. It's a very quick and simple job because they are only young, and those are, I think, a bit further behind than these small fruited sorts as is usual. So probably all I'm going to do today is just nip out the extra branches from the first division, and some of them have split into 2, and that's fine. They can both stay, but we'll go and take a look. Now, what I'm doing today, you can leave until the plants are a little bit bigger, but of course all of the energy they're putting into the branch are going to cut off. It's all a bit wasted. So doing this while those branches are still quite small, it's not a bad idea. So this one is a very nice specimen indeed. I don't pinch these plants out because this split normally happens at a sensible height. You've got to imagine that you don't want this split to happen low down, because this first fruit, which we've got just about to open that flower, this first fruit you have to imagine it's got to be able to hang down sensibly without touching the ground. So these, you could have the branch lower down with a bell pepper, but these bull's horn peppers, they can get pretty big and you don't want them dragging on the dirt. In all likelihood, that is going to decay. So when I planted these out, I tried to make sure that 2 stems were going to be in the right sort of orientation. And you can see there is a 3rd stem here. So that is going to go. And I'm just going to get in there, close down there, and nip that out. Now this is also splitting here, and these are large enough that I can choose which of these to continue with. That one is the weaker. I'm doing it carefully not to damage the potential fruit there. On this side, well, there's very little to choose between those two, I think. I think I'm going to take it off of this side. So at this first split, I'm keeping 2 stems, and then for every other point where the stems divide, I'm just keeping 1. And this will continue to split, and I'll continue to pinch out and or snip off the spare stems, and that's it. I'll just keep these growing up. I mean, we've already got 3 potential fruits at this height. I can see the buds in there for the next set. There's another 3 there. That's 1 for this first division, and then the 2 that will come on the next pair of splits. And off it goes. So 1, 2, 3, and another 3 there, and another 3 there. So we've already got the potential for 9 fruits, even at this point with the plant. So you can see what I mean about this method really not reducing your crop, because you can't imagine the plants producing, you know, after 3, 4, 5 splits, that the potential number of fruits that you've got is far more than these plants are going to be able to bring to full size and ripeness during the season. So they're always going to be a bit of a mixed bag. This one has split into 2, although this other one is, well, you can see that actually it looks like 2 stems are kind of fused there. Doesn't matter at all. I'm just going to do exactly the same. I'm going to nip off some of those. I'll leave that now, and I don't want that. And this is clearly the stronger part, so let's take that away. That's it for now. If you're really careful, you can get in here and pinch out this really small stuff, but it's probably just as well to wait until it's a little bit bigger and easier to handle. And this one's absolutely fine. So at some point, I mean, these are still fine, they're not carrying any weight, but at some point I will need to string these up, and I will put 2 strings up to the top of the greenhouse. I will tie them underneath this joint here. This will become pretty big and strong at some point. So I'll tie them under here and then do the usual trick of wrapping around these stems as they develop. And that will take the weight of the crop when it starts to form. So I've just moved into the polytunnel, and I'm going to take a quick look at the sweet banana peppers here. Now I have pinched out some shoots on these, although I have cheated slightly. So the fruits of the sweet banana, it is a pointed pepper, but they are smaller in stature than the bull's horn type. It's a really prolific fella, and that one I think will fruit a lot more quickly. It's one of the reasons I brought sweet banana back this season. It's been a while since I've grown it, but it does produce quite good fruit quite early in the season. So this will probably carry more fruit than the other, but I'm going to prune it in more or less the same way. But I have cheated a little bit, and I've allowed it to keep a little bit more fruit than I am going to on the bull's horn types. So here's one of the sweet bananas, and you can see the side shoots are coming up here, and when they're at a sensible size to get hold of, I will be pinching those out. I don't want them at all, not in this method of training. But you can see the first split here, and there's the first fruit coming. It's quite an early fruit, that one, and I think I've got, if I just remove very carefully the remains of the flower, yeah, I've got these two have set, as has that one there. Probably set already, but that one will follow. So now you can see that this had split into three, and I've pinched out the top of this spare branch. These are the two that I'm keeping and training on up, but I didn't remove this fruit. Now these had already divided quite a while ago while they were still in the propagators, and the fruit were developing much more quickly on here, and as I say, this one has the potential to produce rather more fruit in terms of quantity, not size, but rather more than the bull's horn peppers. So I've allowed this fruit to remain. I've taken out the two growing points here, so this stem had divided and was going off again. I've taken both of those out. I've left the leaf and the fruit in place, and sometimes I do that, and occasionally I'll even do that with a bull's horn pepper if I've missed a side shoot and it's developed to a certain point. If I think the plant can deal with it, I will leave it in place. But now it's the same game. I'm just going to keep one branch here, and here the decision is really obvious. This one on the right is so much more vigorous. I shall nip that out. And I'm already going to make a choice here as well. I can see the one on the left is more vigorous, so I will take that out. That one is fine. And a similar sort of situation here. This one is clearly more vigorous. I mean, sometimes they'll be very similar, other times there'll be a clear winner. Take that out, and yeah, I can just get in there and nip that out. So this won't need to be touched now for probably another couple of weeks, and then this area here will have developed. So you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 fruits already at each split here, and maybe just make out that the buds are there for the next round. The aubergines in the polytunnel here, they're going to be treated in a very similar way. I haven't decided with those yet whether I'm taking up just one stem or two. I'll have to see how they go, and I will decide later. Their growth habit is a little bit different, but you can do something more or less the same with those, and I'm not going to get a huge number of fruit off of those aubergines. I never seem to get a huge crop off of them. You might do better with a grafted plant, and perhaps with some of those that produce smaller fruits. At least 2 of these produce pretty big round fruit, so they don't produce quite so many of them. And my aubergines are always a little bit hit and miss. My peppers always seem to do very nicely. The aubergines are a little bit dodgy. Of course, I'm growing old varieties as usual, but I think some of the modern sorts, and especially some of the grafted plants, can be a lot more productive. But unless you've got them spaced out well and you want a bushy plant, it is worth thinking about how to prune and train even something like an aubergine or a pepper. Normally when we think about pruning and training, we're thinking about fruit trees, but yeah, it can be quite useful to apply some pruning and training to the peppers as well. So the one thing I don't do is the common thing of pinching out the tops. I will do that only very occasionally, and it's typically with the smaller fruited sorts. if those stems have not divided naturally at a sensible sort of height, if they're just going on and on and on, and they've become really rather tall, then I might pinch out. But I had to do that with, I think it was a couple of the Joe's Long chilies last year, and actually the Joe's Long are really tall this year as well, but they have divided, and I will be getting those side shoots coming along soon anyway, so I haven't pinched them out this year, but I did do that last year just to get them to branch out a little bit lower down. But the rest of them were fine, and this year they're all fine without pinching out. So I don't follow that common advice. There's nothing wrong with it if your goal is to produce a plant with a lower stature and more bushy habit. Just bear in mind that that has implications for airflow and congestion with lots of fruit sort of wedged in the middle of the plant, and I think in particular with larger fruited sorts that doesn't work quite so well. And I like to have that natural, quite slender pepper or chili plant. I think that works nicely for airflow. So anyway, that's all I wanted to do in this video, just cover the reasons why I'm pruning mine in this particular way. And it's slightly unusual. I know the most common advice is to pinch out the tops, but that's why I don't do it that way. And there's nothing wrong with that usual advice. It's perfectly sensible, so long as you understand what's going to happen to your plant, and that is what you're trying to achieve. It's all right to pinch them out. Anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.